My name is Lothaire, and I'm French, and I don't speak Portuguese, unfortunately. So I'm going to speak English with an accent, and I'm going to talk about analytics, which is fascinating, and I hope you're going to enjoy this with me. The reason why I'm here is because before I joined Google, I was working at a company called Rail Europe, which is a small company based in the US that sells train tickets. And I would go to conferences like this, and I would be standing in the audience, and I would listen to talks like the one from Gert, and I would be very inspired by the stories about big data, personalization, and all that kind of stuff. Then I would go back to the office on Monday, and I would be depressed because I wouldn't know where to start. I had very small budget, small team, and I really wanted to do all these cool things that Gert is talking about, but I was very overwhelmed. I didn't know where to start. I thought you need a lot of technology that's going to be very expensive. You need to have scientists working with you to do all this research, and I was really clueless. But then I did a little bit more research, and I realized there's actually a lot of technology that is available for free, and Google actually has a lot of product that you can use that can allow you to get started with big data and do some really, really cool stuff with your analytics and your marketing. So I want to talk about today about the stuff we did at Rail Europe, and it's going to be very concrete, very down to earth, because I want you to be not depressed on Monday, but very inspired and ready to open Google Analytics and do a lot of cool stuff to market your product. So let's get started. Analytics. Starting from the beginning, there's something called the Acquisition Behavior Outcome Framework. And I think it's a very important framework because it breaks down what is important to measure on your site. There are three things that you should be measuring. The first thing is acquisition. Where does your traffic come from? What are your traffic acquisition sources? The second thing is behavior. You want to know what your users are actually doing on your site, of course. And the third thing is outcome. Outcome are basically the valuable events, the valuable conversion that you're gaining from your users' traffic. If you're using Google Analytics, you will see that it's doing a really good job at giving you a lot of insights around acquisition. You get a lot of reports that tell you what campaigns your users have clicked on, what sites they've been before they came to your site, what keywords they typed in search engine. So it's really good to give you insight on traffic sources. If you've implemented also conversion tracking, you will see that you'll get tons of reports around outcome. You can see what are the most popular products you're selling, what are your most profitable marketing channels. You can see, or you can do some really cool stuff like multi-channel analysis and attribution modeling. So it's very good for outcome and conversion measurement. But what about behavior? How can you really, really understand user behavior with a tool like Google Analytics? And it's a very, very important question because as we know, the conversion rate of a site these days is typically maybe 2%, right? So that means that for 98% of the traffic, it comes to your site and leaves without making a purchase. So how do you know what they did during their visits? And to be really honest, I think Google Analytics kind of suck, like Avinash would say, to give you good insights on user behavior by default. And the reason for this is because Google Analytics is designed to do just one thing, which is to measure page view, right? So the main report that you're going to be looking at if you want to see activity on the site in Google Analytics is going to be a report like this, which is kind of like scary, I think. It's a long list of the pages that your users have viewed. So sure, you get also a few metrics from measuring page view, like the average time on site, the average number of page view per visit, the bounce rate, and those are interesting metrics, I think, especially if you have a lot of content on your site, if you're a media site. But we're on the online travel business. Our sites are much more complex. We have unique features that we're spending a lot of money developing. We have a booking engine, we sell hotels, we have shopping carts, we have maps. And I think just tracking page view doesn't really allow you to understand how your users interact with those features. Think about the time on site, for instance. Do we think it's a good thing that people are spending a lot of time on our sites? Is it because they're enjoying themselves and they're consuming a lot of content and having a great experience? Or is it telling us that they're struggling to get anything done and to complete any goal? We cannot draw any conclusion from just looking at the time on site. And the same thing goes for page view. When I worked at Rail Europe, I worked for many months on the redesign of the booking engine. So we were very proud when it launched the new design. And immediately, the page view per visit dropped by 30%. So we were very panicked. We thought it was a catastrophe. We had to roll back. We broke something. And then we looked further and we realized we actually removed one page in our main booking flow, which was a boring page, a stupid page, the waiting page that people would see when they were waiting for the site to give them schedules. So we improved the user experience by removing this page. We made it faster for people to get to the results, but our page view per visits went down 30%. So page view time on site, I don't think are a good KPI for you to understand user behavior and engagement. So what to do? The good news is I think you can get some really interesting insights about your experience, your user's experience on your site. But for this, you need to move on from simply tracking page view, and you need to focus on event tracking. So event tracking, what is event tracking? I think it's a very underused feature of Google Analytics, and it allows you to track any interactions from users on your site and to send any kind of data, the data that matters to you, to Google Analytics, so you can then do some really interesting analysis. So how do you go about starting with tracking events? I think the first thing you need to do is to take a step back and look at your site and do a kind of inventory. Try to ask yourself, what are the very key important things you want to measure? What are the key features that you need to track? Things like your shopping cart, your hotel booking engine if you're selling hotels, or your flight booking engine, or your maps, or your product pages. So come up with a list of those important features. And then the next step is to look at each of those features and try to ask yourself how users can interact with them. How can you describe somebody searching for flights? What are the different data points you can capture? And once you've done this exercise, you're ready to work with your IT team to do a little bit of tagging and implement the Google Analytics tracking code for events. And immediately, you're going to see some fabulous insights go into Google Analytics. So let's look at my favorite report, which is the top event report. So it might not look like anything really extraordinary, but this is actually, I think, the most insightful report in Google Analytics. Because what it's showing you here, it's not the number of page view, it's actually the number of user interaction grouped by functionalities, grouped by functional areas. So this is the example of what the report looks like for Ruellan Europe. And we can answer the question I was asking in the beginning, what are users doing on the site during their visits? We can see 67% of the users are going to the point-to-point ticket booking engine. 25% of the users are going to book hotel. 15% of the users are going to the product pages. So you can see the relative usage of the features of the site. Very, very insightful, I think. But that's not all. Because you can send any kind of data through custom event tracking, you can drill down into each of those functional areas to get detailed insights about how your users are actually searching for tickets or searching for hotels. So let's look at the booking engine, the point-to-point booking engine, as how we call it, which is where users go when they want to get prices and schedule for trains in Europe. So let's think we're Rail Europe and we're trying to understand how people use this tool. What kind of data can we capture? Well, the first thing we might be interested in tracking is whether people are searching for one-way ticket, round trip, or multi-city trips. We also might want to know how many trips the user is searching in their itinerary. We also might want to know, of course, the exact itinerary, the routes that the user is looking for. We also might want to know how many days ahead of departure the user is doing the search. And sometimes we're able to find schedule, there's a train, but sometimes there is no train. So sometimes we're able to find results, sometimes the search fails. So it's very important to know when you're able to find results or if the search is failing. So all this data, you can send it in real time as it happens to Google Analytics using custom event tracking. And then you're going to be able to see reports like this. The number of searches broken down by one-way, round-trip, multi-city. Very important for a company like Rail Europe. And the same thing is if you're selling flights, you want to see something like this. You can see the number of searches broken down by number of trips in the user's itinerary. You can see the number of searches by how many days ahead of departure the user is doing the search. And of course, the most important thing, you can see the number of trips by route. We sell thousands of train tickets on the Rail Europe website. There are thousands of possible itineraries. So these sort of reports allow you to understand what are the top routes, what are the long tail routes, where is your demand, how it is structured, and how it's changing over time. So not only can you get the total number of searches that users are making, But you can also get the total number of searches that are successful, that we're able to show results for. And Google Analytics even calculates for you a ratio of the total successful searches over the search requested. And that gives you the success rate of your booking engine. And that's a very, very important KPI for a company like Ruellan Europe, because you can then look at your overall success rate for your booking engine, and then look at the route level and compare it. And then you can find some routes where there's a lot of searches, which means there's a lot of demand. People are looking for schedule for those trips. And the success rate is low, which means you're not able to satisfy the demand. And then Ruellan Europe is able to work with its suppliers to get access to additional inventory, or to work with the IT team to get more schedules loaded. So they're able to capture additional business by using those insights. Now that we have all these data in Google Analytics, a nice thing we can do also is to look at different attributes of an event. So for instance, we can look at the number of searches broken down by route and broken down by search mode. And then we can start uncovering some very interesting trends, some very interesting insights, like we can find some routes that tend to be booked more often as a round trip than the average. For instance, we saw that London to Paris was searched as a round trip at 40% of the time, whereas the average number of round-trip searches is just 20%. So that tells us that users who are traveling between Paris and London, they tend to buy round trips. So with this information, what we did is we created promotion or special fares that were priced at a discount for people booking round trips. Another example of how you can do this kind of analysis and look at two different attributes is you can look at the keyword that people typed in search engine before they came to the site, and then what they actually did on the site. So this example is we look at the keyword Eurostar, which is the name of a train that is between London and Paris. And what we saw is that, well, 60% of the people went to book tickets, which makes sense, of course, but also 15% of the people went to book hotels. And we didn't expect that. We didn't expect that someone typing the name of a train would go and buy a hotel. But with this information, what we did is we changed our SEM ad on the Google search engine result page to feature a link to our hotel deals. And that really increased the click-through rate because we were able to showcase the full breadth of our offering. So event tracking is really, really exciting and really cool because you can track anything. So if you have a user account, for instance, you can use event tracking to track how many times people are logging in to your site, how many times people are registering. And a few years ago at Ruellan Europe, we launched a feature to let people sign into the site using their Facebook account. And for the longest time, we had no idea if people were actually using this functionality until we implemented event tracking. And we saw that almost 60% of users were actually signing into the site using Facebook. So that really allowed us to understand that, to validate that the fact that this functionality we built was actually useful. You can use event tracking to track videos. If you're spending money like we did shooting videos, it's very important to know if people are actually watching them, right? And we found that it was very disappointing because just not even 1% of our traffic was watching video. And we also saw that out of the people who watch video, just half of them were watching video until the end. So that was kind of disappointing. But by tracking video, you can also segment your traffic between the users that watched video and the users that didn't watch video. And we saw, which was great, that people who watched video were much more likely to convert. So even though the exposure was low, we were able to quantify the value of putting videos on our website. You can use event tracking also to track interactions with your shopping cart or your checkout flow. What we did is we tracked an event when someone added product to the cart, and we also fire an event when someone checks out. And by doing this, we're able to compare the total value of the product that people put in the cart and the total value of products that are actually booked. And we saw that half of the products put in the cart are actually never booked. Something that's very, very important to track, and I don't see it being done very often, but it's very easy to do, is to track error messages. Error messages are frustrating. Your users hate seeing errors. 60% of users that were, we did a research and we found out that 60% of users are complaining about their experience booking travel online. So it's unavoidable that people are going to make mistakes or your site is going to break down, but you need to know what is going on and when people are going to see error messages, because then it's an opportunity for you to make improvement to your site. So track what error messages people are seeing and track on what pages the errors are appearing. So we did that, and we noticed something, that one of the most frequent errors was what is called here the geo-ambiguity error, which means that someone's typing a city name in our booking engine and we don't recognize it. They misspelled it maybe. So what we did is we came up with a way of translating the most frequent misspellings or alternative spellings into the name that our booking engine recognized automatically. And by doing this, we were able to reduce the error rate by almost 30%. And that's very important to provide a better experience for your users. So I could go on and show you like dozens of things that we can track with event tracking, because it's my favorite subject, but I think you get the point. What I want to tell you, what I want to insist on is like three things that you can actually do once you've implemented event tracking. Because I think tracking event is nice to get the data, but then it's important to act on the data. So number one thing you can do is optimize your marketing. We saw how at Ruellan Europe we created promotions, or we changed our SEM ads because we had insights that we didn't have before. We had a better understanding of users' behavior, of users' intent, so we were able to better market our product to our users. The second thing you can do is, of course, improve your site. By tracking error, you can find areas on the site where users are struggling or are having problems. And then you can get to work and prioritize enhancements, fixes, solutions to make the experience better. And the third thing you can do, which is very, very exciting, and it's something you can only do by using Google Analytics and AdWords, it's remarketing with Google Analytics. So let's talk more about remarketing. Remarketing, basically, it's when you link your AdWords account and your Google Analytics account, you'll be able to create inside Google Analytics remarketing lists. And what those remarketing lists are, they're basically advanced segments that you create by querying all the data that is in Google Analytics. So it's really, I think, very, very exciting, because Google Analytics tracks everything. It tracks how many times a user has been to your site, how much time they spent over their lifetime, what the activity they've done, what keyword they used to come to your site. So you can use all this data to find segments that are interesting. And then you can use those segments to create campaigns to retarget those users across the entire Google Display Network. So let's see a few examples of campaigns we did using Google Analytics and remarketing. The first campaign we did was, of course, to target people who came to the Ruellan website, searched for tickets, and then didn't convert. And for those users, we wanted to show a very relevant ad. We didn't want to show a generic ad, a branded ad. But it was difficult because we sell thousands of tickets and we couldn't have the resources to create thousands of banners for every route that we sold. So instead, we used a really cool features of AdWords that is just recently being released, which is called dynamic remarketing for travel. So with dynamic remarketing for travel, all you need to do is to create one ad, one dynamic ad, and Google will take care of populating the ad's content for every impression based on what Google knows about the user's previous activity. So if someone came to your site and searched for hotels in Paris, the ad would say, book hotel in Paris. If someone came to your site and searched for hotels in London, the same ad would say, book hotels in London. It's very effective, very scalable to reach all your audience. The second campaign we did, which was, of course, very, very effective, is to target those people that put stuff in your shopping cart and then left and didn't convert. We saw that half of the value of the product put in the cart are actually never booked. So it's money that is sitting on the table for you to grab. So not only did we do that, but we also segmented these people based on how much the cart value was, because for us, of course, we wanted to encourage people with a high cart value to convert. So you can show different ads based on the cart value, and for people who had a high cart value, we would show an ad that would give them a coupon code, whereas for people who had a low cart value, we would just show like a generic ad. And the third campaign we did with remarketing is focusing on people who are the most ready to convert, the people with the most likelihood to make a purchase. So how do you do this? It's actually quite easy, because if you look at your site, there are certain events that are very indicative of someone being shopping for a trip. If you see someone that repeatedly comes to your site and looks for hotels prices, or if you see someone that uses your maps to just put together an itinerary, or someone signs into your account, you can find those key events that are indicative of someone having the intent to buy something. And then you can count over time how many times a user completes those events. And you can find those segments of users who are the most engaged with your shopping feature. And you can target those users and focus your marketing dollars on the segment that is the most ready to convert. It's very, very effective, and it's something you can do using events, goals, and remarketing. So I hope you're just as excited as I am to implement event tracking and remarketing. If that's the case, I want to leave you with 3 tips so you can get it right on Monday when you get to the office. The first thing is, what I want to tell you is you want to make sure that whenever you build something on your site, if you do a new feature or if you enhance a feature, make sure that you plan and implement tracking. Because very often I worked on projects where we would launch something and we would, the measurement was kind of an afterthought. We say, oh, we're going to track it later, we'll do the implementation later. But then what happens is there's always something else to do and you never end up doing the tracking. So what you're going to end up doing is doing decisions based on no information or wrong information or just your opinion. And it's very, very bad. So I think what's very important is you create a culture in your organization where measurement is a key requirement. The second thing I want to tell you is analytics is not that easy. So what you'll want to do to get it right and save some money is actually work with certified analytics partners or hire people who know the tool. Analytics is free, Google Analytics is free, so with the money you're saving on licenses, you can invest some of that money to work with experts who are going to make it easy for you to get the right data. There's nothing worse than having an implementation that is not working or giving you wrong data, and I see it all the time at Google now. So save some of that money and invest in people. And the nice thing about doing that is that you'll learn yourself. That's personally how I learned analytics myself. I worked with consultants in the beginning in Ruellan Europe, and now I gain my knowledge and I think I can do it. So eventually, this is how you're going to be able to get that expertise in your company. And the last thing I want to tell you is if you're going to do tagging for your site to track events, it's a good time to think about using a tag management system. The reason for this is that if you want to capture data for analytics, for instance, chances are you want to also use this data to power other campaigns, for instance, Facebook remarketing or other ad networks. You're going to want to work with many third parties. And there's nothing worse than having to ask your IT team over and over again to tag the site and to tag the same event many times. It's a waste of time, a waste of resources. But if you implement a tag management system, and Google has one, it's called Google Tag Manager, and it's free also, but there's many other on the market. All you have to do is to tag the site once, one little piece of code, and the data that you send to your tag management system is going to be available for you to use with any third-party program, and you don't have to ask your IT team to do anything. You're going to be the owner of this data, and you can be able to use it with Facebook, with DoubleClick, whoever you want to work with. So these were my tips. I hope you're ready to get started with event tracking, and I hope I was able to tell you that big data doesn't have to be intimidating or overwhelming. There's simple things, simple tools that are free that you can learn. There's a lot of great resources out there to build your own skills and start doing some really cool, exciting marketing. Thank you.